Right then, so in this video, I'm joined with the one and only Joe from OmniPoke. And we're going to look at 6 Pokemon TCG topics and rank them as either overrated or underrated. Let's go. The idea of testing. Is testing as a concept underrated or overrated? Oh, we've got ourselves an immediate disagreement. Joe, talk to me. Why do you think testing is overrated?
Because typically when you're playtesting in person, you can't actually bash out many games, and you can oftentimes get yourself really caught into a bias just by like a really short number of games. So you can end up adding in tech cards or making changes just by how very specific things happen in very specific games of testing that then like completely just warps your deck list and can actually send you down avenues that you didn't really need to with a certain deck. Plus, it also matters who you're testing with, right? Sometimes if you're testing against someone who's not as proficient in a certain deck as like an expert that would be going into a tournament, you can feel like you're safer in a matchup when there are lines that haven't been discussed or something you haven't come across yet. So this one kind of comes down to who you're testing with a lot of the time, but a lot of the time you can also just get caught in your own biases, I feel, with testing in person.
That is fantastic, actually. It all makes perfect sense to me, and I feel as if my view on IRL testing may have been, like you say, it's down to your testing with, and obviously I do most of my testing with Demi, you know,
Sure.
number 1 in the UK CP currently, I believe. And yeah, I feel when I test with him, we have to be very meticulous. We have to try and eliminate, you know, like a free game bias. If, you know, one deck dead draws 3 times, where you can't just be like, oh, you know, this deck's bad. That's big. Law of averages. Let's play another 10 games even, and let's see how stuff pans out. And I think in the grand scheme of things, that's worked quite well for me. As a whole, people do not test enough, and I find it absolutely invaluable.
I mean, of course, testing is good, but yeah.
Fair enough. Conceding games early, Joe. What's your thought process on that? 3, 2, 1. Yeah, we're agreeing again. I'm liking this. I'm liking how we keep agreeing. Go on then, Joe. You go first this time. Why is that a good thing, or why is it underrated?
It's one of the best things you have in your control in terms of timekeeping, right? If you know a game's gone, pack it up. No point sitting around waiting for them to show you the exact outs. If they're going down certain lines, you just expect them to have it right, and you can't really play towards them making a mistake. You have to expect your opponent is being competent and playing to their best win conditions all the time. So if you feel yourself in a really bad position, really good to save yourself time. In a best of 3 50-minute, no matter what deck you're playing, you want as much time as possible to swing that L into a dub. So yeah, definitely good to concede as early as possible. When I went 9-0 day 1 with Malamar, I insta-conceded, I think, 3 of the games I played into the 5 Mews I faced, and I 2-1'd all of them. I literally saw my opening hand and insta-scooped. I didn't even wait for them to like play the opening ball search or whatever. I just went straight away after seeing my opening hand. So sometimes you'll get bitten by that and it does hurt, but trust the process that insta-scooping is the best way to effectively earn 3 points in a lot of situations based on what deck you're playing. The one caveat to that will be we're going into an Iono format, so it is a lot less of the case because we have comebacks. But in the current iteration of the TCG, especially if you're not playing Roxanne, yeah, insta-scooping is pretty good.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't think I've got much to add, apart from a little fact that on the last season from the events I played, I can't remember how many it was, but I never tied around, and a lot of that
That's good. That is good.
I didn't tie off. I just knew. I was like, well, if I ain't winning, I'm gonna try my best to try and get the 2 wins. So if I'm losing a quick game, scoop them up, and those wins are very important. And I think, like you said, when you can see the game getting too far away from you, or like you said in your case, when you just look at your open hand and say, nope, not today, sunshine. That just comes from, you know, knowing the deck, knowing the matchups, and all that jazz. And yeah, I think it's super important. Now here's an interesting one, Joe. I was excited to get your opinion on this one. The idea of PTCG coaching. Do we think that idea is overrated or underrated? Oh yes, we've both gone underrated. Talk to me, Joe. Talk to me.
Well, I think essentially you're just getting direct access to some of the best players in the world, and you're getting to see their thought process, how they play the game, and you're getting that ideal direct line. You have so many options out there for coaches, which we're really fortunate with, to be honest, how much great talent there is out there. So you can find someone that clicks for you. You can find someone who's on the same wavelength. You can sort of shop around and see what different styles you'd like in a coach. And once you get that down, you're basically, just having that communication with someone. You're seeing their testing before a tournament as well. That can be really huge for getting top players' perspectives before like a new set's come out or a rotation, all that other stuff that you sometimes just can't get. If you haven't been playing the game for very long, you just won't have integrated yourself into friendship groups too much outside of like locals. So I think just getting that shot in the arm of really just like seeing the game from a different perspective from that higher level is massive. And I really encourage this for anyone who is in a lower age division specifically. I think there's massive like upsides to having coaches. There's a lot of players that are getting coaching from those lower age divisions, but the pricing is so good in lower age divisions. I would definitely say that if you have a senior or junior player that's thinking about coaching, definitely explore that avenue. I think it's really, really great.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail 100% on the head. I think last season where I wanted to take the game a bit more seriously, when I started testing with Demi more, like I said, I've mentioned Demi before, just hearing how he'll look at a game or look at a boss, I think, wow, I didn't even consider that. He's like, well, if you do this play now, in 3 turns, you can't do this. I'm like, yeah, you're right, And I feel as if unless you operate at that level already, it's very hard to spot all these things on your own. And sometimes you're just paying this coach X amount just to give you that access and thought process immediately. It's just invaluable, especially if you're like trying to do big tournament things or you're trying to get your first Worlds invite. It's the sort of thing you can't learn on your own by just zorbing games against yourself or testing on TCG Live. You're just not going to do it. And then over time, you learn these lines yourself, and then maybe you can start to go your own way. But I think as a concept immediately, I think it's invaluable.
Yeah, you can get caught into bad habits if you just don't and play against friends and stuff so often. And it'll give you a different perspective of making your own testing more useful as well. Like, you're just inefficiently using your time if you don't have a coach to sort of lead you through the opening stages of deck building and why things are in there. So it really just pole vaults you as a player, I think.
Ability used markers. You might see them if you watch the stream. Some people love them. What do you think about them, Joe? Underrated or overrated? Yes then, let's go. I'll start with this one. I just think sometimes, I've seen this happen before. You don't want to get into a scenario where someone says you've used Greninja twice, for example. Now there's no scoop on it, that can easily happen. And similar to like we said with price checking, you just want to just get as much stuff in your favor. And I feel as if you've got a hard marker there that says, I've used this, so your opponent can't try and do anything naughty. That seems like a plus in my book. They cost like £5 to £10 max, and it also keeps you in check to make sure you don't do anything untoward as well.
Yeah, I think my ideal opponent is someone who's making everything as clear for me as possible, so we're both fully aware of what's going on. I'm going to try and make it as easy for my opponent to figure out what I'm doing throughout the game, and I think ability markers really help that. And obviously just tracking out your own turn. It can be really helpful. Even just laying the markers in front of the Pokemon so you know that you're going to try and use them on your turn and stuff like that can be really helpful. It just makes things easier for everyone without having to do silly like tilts of cards and stuff, because then there's that like, is he just a messy player or is things tilted for this, that and the other reason, and sort of untilting them, whereas it's pretty easy just to take markers off and on at the start of games, turns and stuff. So really, really big fan of them. They just make everything more simple for everyone involved.
Yeah, 100%. Sometimes if you just do the tilt and you might forget to turn them back if it's your turn, you think you're right. Have I used this Genesect already? Do yourself a favour, get on TC Evolutions, buy some of them. Failing that, just use like coins. You can use anything, honestly. Like, what's
you can use the poison and burn, just the upside down. So easy.
You can use anything. Just do yourself a favour. You just, big fan of that. The idea of always playing rogue/off meta deck, you could argue counter decks as well, that fall under this umbrella. Is it underrated or overrated? 3, 2, 1. Hey, love that. Okay, I'm gonna say I'll start with this one. I feel as if when I first started, I was this person. I would never touch a deck. If it was on Limitless, I ain't doing it. I just ain't doing it. And then I realised quite early on, I was like, I'm just hampering myself here. The chances are, if there was a big counter deck that's gonna do well, probably not little old me is going to think it up, right? There's going to be some other big brains, Joe over there will be the one to think of it. So then I thought, okay, just play the good stuff, right? And then if there's an obvious hole to the meta that no one seems to have somehow filled, then I'll go do that. But until then, I'm not going to go out of my way every time to look for it. Sometimes when a format's, quite mature or late, you just got to pick a deck and roll with it. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think the same. I really think people fall into this trap of like seeing like Cawthon's success at Worlds or Shintara's success at Worlds and think, man, it's so cool to have come up with this idea. But they came up with that idea in terms of targeting a metagame, and that's what's always like lost in translation. They weren't just playing edgy cards to be like cool and surprising and like gain clout or whatever. They're doing it for very specific matchup reasons to still give themselves the best chance to win. Yeah. And that's what's really been lost in all this like rogue deck building, where essentially it's come down to like, oh, I want to be spicy, I want this extra bit of clout because I did well with this deck, rather than, you know, any other archetype that you could have picked up. You are, like you said, essentially hindering yourself, and you get the same amount of championship points for doing well with good decks, and it's just going to be easier.
Yeah, like for sure. Like when I've been doing these, you know, build a deck for I think $10, build a deck for $5. That's when you have to really sit down and think, how can I target these meta decks? So that's when you realise it's hard, you know. Like, yeah. The good decks are good for a reason. And a lot of the times, countering a deck like Lost Box and Mew are very different things. One's a 310 HP monster, and the other one's a little 70 HP donation with just sprinkles and damage out. Sometimes
different, yeah.
Sometimes it's just not possible, honestly. Like, I'll try my best. Like, I even said in the build deck for £10 video, my game plan for Lost Box is to just Marnie Judge and hope they haven't got anything. That's as far as I can get to. So sometimes it's just not possible. Testing your bad matchup. So let's say you know what deck you're going to play for an event. How effective do you think testing your strictly bad matchups is, I should say. 3, 2, 1. Yes! Love that again. Go on, Joe. Talk to the people.
Unless it's like an 80-20 or something where you're literally saying, I don't ever want to hit this, my only win con is like brick, like they brick. Anytime you can squeeze out 3 or 4% just by attacking a different order or using different things, getting different Pokemon out into play, or whether or not it's worth it to play a tech card that can give you a boost in 5 to 10% or not. You know, sometimes if you think it's a tech card that many lists are playing and they think it gets close, but then you test that matchup and it's still not close, save yourself that space, gain more consistency, play other things. So it's still just it's more testing, it's more exploring, it's more information for you to make the best decision with, which is what it's all about. And, you know, if you are just a little bit more experienced in a bad matchup than the opponent, who's, you know, almost thinking, oh, look, I'm up against this matchup, it should be free for me, you can try and, again, prey on those little percentages.
No, 100%. I echo everything you've said there. And I think, like you said, working out, is it worth teching for something? You're only going to find that out if you test. And sure, it might be annoying testing against a bad matchup, knowing that you might lose, you know, 7 out of 10 times or 6 out of 10 times, whatever it is. But like you said there as well, right? Like, if you know how that matchup goes on paper, like you know the game plan for both decks just because you played against it so much, and you're at an event and your opponent doesn't play 100% perfect, you're like, oh, wait a minute, they didn't do X, I do Y. Yeah. All of a sudden now I've got a sneaky W I wouldn't have. And then and when you're trying to scrape those day twos or, you know, push for the top, anything like this, you need as many W's as you can. Or maybe even turning a loss into a tie. If you can do that once over the course of an event, it was worth it, in my opinion. So
definitely.
I'm always up for testing the bad matchups. The amount of times you'll see me like at NIC, I'll have my deck on one monitor, the bad matchup on the other monitor, limitless tabletop, just grind it out as much as I can to work out, you know, what's the best way to punish this or the best way to try and swing that. And honestly, it's invaluable. Honestly, yeah, testing the bad matchup, you need to do it, I think.